Damon worked the worst shift at the biggest museum in space. While everyone else slept, he pushed his beat-up cleaning cart through dark hallways filled with alien artifacts that cost more than his entire planet. The Galactic Heritage Museum sat on Station Nexus, a massive space station that floated between 3 different solar systems. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of interspecies cooperation, but for Damon, it was just another place where humans got the leftover jobs. His back ached as he wheeled the cart around another corner. The night security guard, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes, barely glanced at him. Damon had been invisible to most aliens for the past 2 years. They saw his human uniform and immediately dismissed him as unimportant. Sometimes that stung, but tonight he was too tired to care. The museum held treasures from across the galaxy. Ancient weapons that could level mountains. Artwork that moved and sang in languages nobody remembered. Technology so advanced that even looking at it wrong could supposedly drive you insane. And here was Damon with his mop bucket, making sure none of it got dusty. His supervisor tonight was Crix, a short purple alien who always smelled like sulfur and bad decisions. Crix waddled over with a special keycard in his stubby fingers. "Human Damon," Crix wheezed through his breathing apparatus, "tonight you clean the new exhibit. Very important. Very expensive. Do not touch anything except floor." The keycard felt heavier than it should have. Damon looked at the strange symbols etched into its surface. Which exhibit? The Progenitor Temple. Archaeology team made mess. Use strong cleaner. Floor has many patterns. Crix made a gesture that might have been dismissive or threatening. With his species, it was hard to tell the difference. Damon had heard whispers about the Progenitor Temple. The archaeological team had been working on it for months, and everyone was excited because nobody had ever found progenitor technology that was still intact. The progenitors were like ghosts in galactic history. Everyone knew they existed millions of years ago, but they vanished without leaving much behind. Finding a whole temple was like discovering buried treasure. The exhibit hall was massive, with a ceiling that stretched up into darkness. Security lights cast long shadows across the floor, and in the center sat the most beautiful thing Damon had ever seen. The temple wasn't built. It looked like it had grown from a single piece of crystal. It rose 30 feet high, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow even in the dim light. Damon set up his equipment and really looked at the floor for the first time. The patterns weren't just carved into the crystal surface. They went deep, creating channels and pathways that connected in ways that hurt his eyes to follow. Some sections glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The archaeological team had definitely tracked mud and debris all over it, leaving brown smears across the beautiful designs. He filled his bucket with the heavy-duty cleaning solution and dipped his mop. The chemical smell was sharp and industrial, designed to cut through anything organic. As he started cleaning, he noticed how the solution seemed to disappear into the tiny cracks between symbols instead of pooling on the surface like it should. The work was strangely relaxing. Each symbol he cleaned seemed to respond to his touch, glowing a little brighter once the grime was gone. The patterns were hypnotic, drawing his eyes along flowing lines that spiraled toward the temple's center. He found himself moving in rhythm with the pulse of the light, mop strokes matching the gentle glow. Hours passed without him noticing. The temple floor was enormous, covered in thousands of individual symbols that connected in an impossibly complex web. His shoulders burned and his feet ached, but something kept him going. Maybe it was pride in doing the job right, or maybe it was the strange sense that this work was important somehow. As he cleaned, Damon started noticing things that didn't make sense. The symbols weren't just decorative, they looked almost like circuitry if circuits could be grown instead of built. Some sections seemed to be scanning him as he worked, warm spots following his movement across the floor. Once or twice he could have sworn he heard something like a whisper coming from deep inside the crystal, but when he stopped to listen there was only silence. The cleaning solution continued disappearing into the microscopic channels, carrying with it traces of human DNA from his sweat and skin cells. Deep beneath the crystal surface, systems that had waited longer than human civilization began their first startup sequence in millions of years. But Damon just kept mopping, humming an old Earth song under his breath, completely unaware that he was about to change the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Deep inside the crystal temple, something ancient stirred to life. The cleaning solution had carried microscopic traces of Damon's DNA through hairline cracks in the floor, feeding it directly into sensors that hadn't tasted genetic material in millions of years. These weren't ordinary sensors, they were biological scanners more advanced than anything the current galaxy had ever imagined. The temple's core began analyzing the human genetic code with desperate hunger. For eons, it had waited for this moment, programmed to recognize one specific genetic signature among all the billions of species that might one day walk across its sacred floor. As the analysis completed, something impossible happened. The results showed a match. Not a perfect match, but close enough. The human DNA contained sequences that aligned with the progenitor genetic template, corrupted by millions of years of evolution and planetary isolation, but still recognizably connected to the race that had built this temple before the current galactic civilization even existed. A pulse of pure energy shot through the temple's crystalline structure. Every symbol on the floor blazed with brilliant light for exactly 3 seconds before dimming back to their gentle glow. Damon paused in his mopping, thinking maybe there had been some kind of electrical surge. The station's power grid was always having problems. What he didn't know was that the temple had just sent out the most powerful signal in galactic history. The message traveled faster than light itself, carried by quantum entanglement networks that spanned the entire galaxy. It was a simple message, broadcast in the ancient progenitor language that only their technology could understand. The inheritors have returned. Activate all Guardian protocols. Protect the children at all costs. On the dead world of Kepler 438b, buried under a mile of radioactive sand, something that had slept for 3 million years opened electronic eyes. The Guardian-class warship Eternal Vigil had been waiting in this tomb since the Great Exodus, its fusion reactors in hibernation mode, its crew compartments empty but ready. As the activation signal reached its communication array, the massive vessel began its wake-up sequence. Emergency power flowed through corridors that hadn't seen light since humans were still learning to make fire. Weapon systems that could crack planets ran diagnostics on themselves. The ship's artificial intelligence, ancient beyond measure but sharp as the day it was created, began calculating the fastest route to the signal source. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out on hundreds of worlds. Guardian ships hidden in asteroid fields shook off millions of years of cosmic dust. Vessels buried in ocean trenches on water worlds began pumping out the liquid that had preserved them. Ships disguised as moons around gas giants fired up engines that burned hotter than stars. The Star Keeper had been waiting in the Horsehead Nebula, using the cosmic dust as camouflage. Its captain had been a progenitor named Valdris, who had volunteered to sleep until the lost colonies returned to claim their birthright. Now her ship sang with power as it prepared for a journey she had dreamed about for millennia. In the Andromeda approach, the battleship World Ender received the signal while floating in the empty space between galaxies. Its mission had been different from the others. If the colonies never returned, it was supposed to ensure that no other species ever found the hidden progenitor technology caches. But the activation signal changed everything. The ship's destructive purpose transformed into protective instinct as it plotted a course toward the Milky Way. Each ship that awakened sent confirmation signals to the others, creating a communication network that spanned impossible distances. They shared navigation data, tactical assessments, and most importantly, coordinates for the signal source. Every Guardian ship in the galaxy now knew exactly where to find Station Nexus. The closest ship was the Iron Promise, which had been hiding in the asteroid belt of an uninhabited solar system only 12 light-years away. Its journey would take 3 days at maximum warp. Other ships were farther out, but they were already beginning their approach, their ancient engines bending space and time to shorten the journey. Back on the station, Damon finished cleaning the last section of temple floor and stepped back to admire his work. The entire surface now gleamed with soft, rhythmic light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was beautiful, and for the first time in months he felt proud of something he'd accomplished. He gathered his cleaning supplies and started pushing the cart toward the exit, whistling the same old Earth song. Behind him, the temple continued its work, sending out targeting data and strategic information to the approaching fleet. Every few minutes, another confirmation signal arrived from a distant Guardian ship, and the temple's glow grew slightly brighter. Within 72 hours, the largest military force in galactic history would arrive at Station Nexus. Their mission was simple: protect the human who had awakened them, and eliminate any threat to their long-lost children. But Damon just wanted to finish his shift and get some sleep. He had no idea that his DNA had just declared war on the entire galaxy. The first alarm went off in the Centauri defense grid at exactly 0347 station time. Lieutenant Commander Vex was halfway through her morning coffee when every sensor screen in the monitoring station exploded with warning lights. The massive energy signature that appeared on their long-range scanners was unlike anything in their database, bigger than a space station, moving faster than any known ship, and heading directly toward populated space. "Run a full diagnostic," she ordered her team. "This has to be a malfunction." But the diagnostics came back clean. Whatever was out there was real and it was enormous. Within minutes, similar alarms were sounding across the galaxy. The Rigel Sector Command detected 3 massive objects emerging from hyperspace near their outer colonies. The Andorian fleet picked up energy readings that made their most powerful battleships look like toys. Even the mysterious shadows, who rarely communicated with other species, sent urgent warnings about ancient powers stirring in the void. Admiral Rodriguez of the United Colonies was in an emergency meeting when her aide burst through the doors with a tablet full of sensor data. "Admiral, you need to see this. We're detecting progenitor energy signatures." The room went dead silent. Everyone knew about the progenitors from history classes, the mysterious race that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins and legends. But their technology was supposed to be extinct. "That's impossible," Rodriguez said, but her voice lacked conviction. The energy patterns on the screen were unmistakable. They matched the readings from every progenitor artifact in every museum across known space. Across the galaxy, military commanders were having similar conversations. The Hegemony Council called an emergency session. The Trade Federation suspended all shipping routes. Even the normally peaceful botanical worlds began powering up their defensive systems. On Station Nexus, Damon was just getting back to the maintenance office when the first evacuation announcement echoed through the corridors. He dropped his cleaning supplies and looked around in confusion as aliens of every species began running past him, carrying belongings and shouting in languages he couldn't understand. "Hey, what's going on?" he called out to a passing security guard. The guard, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, barely slowed down. "Ancient warships approaching. All civilians to emergency shelters." Damon stood there processing this information. Ancient warships? He pulled out his personal communicator and tried to access the news feeds, but the station's network was overloaded with emergency traffic. All he could get were fragments, something about massive ships, progenitor technology, and impending doom. In the archaeological department, Dr. Reeves was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. She'd been studying progenitor artifacts for 20 years, and she knew better than anyone what their technology was capable of. If progenitor warships were really awakening, it meant only one thing: something had triggered their ancient programming. She ran through the museum halls, her mind racing. The timing couldn't be coincidental. The temple had been installed just yesterday and now this was happening. She burst into the progenitor exhibit hall and stopped dead in her tracks. The temple was glowing brighter than she'd ever seen it. The patterns on the floor pulsed with rhythmic light that seemed almost alive. And the air around it hummed with energy that made her skin tingle. "The genetic scanner," she whispered, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Someone triggered the genetic scanner. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming message from the Galactic Defense Force. The text was short and terrifying: "Progenitor fleet detected. ETA to your position, 36 hours. Evacuate immediately." Meanwhile, the approaching Guardian ships were causing panic everywhere they passed. The Iron Promise emerged from hyperspace near a mining colony, and every ship in the system immediately broadcast surrender signals. But the massive progenitor vessel ignored them completely, adjusting its course toward Station Nexus without firing a shot. The same scene played out across a dozen systems. Progenitor ships appeared, scanned the area, and continued toward their destination. They didn't attack, but they didn't respond to any communication attempts either. They just moved with terrifying purpose toward one specific point in space. News networks across the galaxy were in chaos. Some reported an invasion. Others claimed it was the beginning of a new galactic war. A few suggested that the progenitors had returned from wherever they'd been hiding for millions of years. But none of them knew the truth, that a human janitor named Damon had accidentally sent out a dinner invitation to the most powerful military force in galactic history, and they were coming to protect him from threats he didn't even know existed. On Station Nexus, evacuation shuttles were launching every few minutes, carrying terrified aliens to safety. But Damon was still in the maintenance office trying to figure out what was happening and why everyone was so scared. He had no idea that in less than 2 days, he would be standing face to face with the descendants of gods. The evacuation alarms had been screaming for 6 hours when Dr. Reeves finally found Damon hiding in the maintenance storage room. He was sitting on a crate of cleaning supplies, staring at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Around them, the station groaned and shuddered as the last evacuation shuttles prepared to launch. "You're still here," she said, breathing hard from running through the empty corridors. Damon looked up with tired eyes. "Yeah, well, nobody told me where I was supposed to go. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone would miss me if I stayed." Dr. Reeves pulled out her tablet and showed him the sensor readings. Do you see these energy signatures? They're identical to the patterns on the temple floor. The floor you cleaned yesterday. So those patterns aren't decorations. They're a genetic scanner, designed to identify descendants of the progenitor race. And somehow your DNA triggered it. Damon stared at the screen, then at her, then back at the screen. Lady, I'm from Ohio. My biggest accomplishment before this job was fixing toilets without flooding the bathroom. I don't know anything about ancient aliens. That's just it, you don't have to know anything. Your genetics did all the work. She pulled up another screen showing DNA analysis results. Human genetic code contains sequences that match progenitor templates. You're not just some random janitor, Damon. You're the descendant of the most advanced civilization in galactic history. The storage room door burst open, and Commander Crix waddled in with a squad of heavily armed security guards. His purple skin had turned almost black with stress, and his breathing apparatus wheezed more frantically than usual. Human Damon, he gasped, you will come with us immediately. The Galactic Council demands your transfer to their custody. What if I say no? Crix's many eyes blinked in sequence. Then we will drag you. The approaching fleet has enough firepower to sterilize every inhabited world in this sector. They believe you are either working with them or you have triggered some kind of weapon. Dr. Reeves stepped between them. He's not going anywhere until we understand what's happening. Through the station's viewports, the first progenitor ship became visible to the naked eye. The Iron Promise was still 12 hours out, but its massive hull reflected starlight like a black mirror covered in flowing patterns of blue and gold. Even at this distance, it looked impossibly large and definitely alive. The ships aren't attacking anyone, Dr. Reeves pointed out. They're not even responding to communications. They're just coming here. Damon stood up slowly, his legs shaky from sitting too long. What happens if I go with you? The council will probably want to study you, Crix admitted. Or perhaps use you as a bargaining chip with the fleet. And if I stay? Dr. Reeves checked her readings from the temple. The ships are still receiving signals from the temple. If we can figure out how to communicate with them through you, maybe we can prevent a war. Through the station's communication system, panicked reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy. Military fleets were mobilizing, but everyone knew their weapons were useless against progenitor technology. Some colonies were already surrendering without a fight. Others were going into deep hiding, hoping to wait out whatever was coming. Damon walked to the storage room's small viewport and stared out at the approaching ship. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, covered in the same flowing patterns he'd been mopping just yesterday. As he watched, the patterns seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. They're not here to hurt anyone, are they? He said quietly. Dr. Reeves joined him at the viewport. I don't think so. Progenitor ruins always show them as protectors, not conquerors. But their technology is so far beyond ours that they might accidentally destroy us while trying to help. More ships were appearing on the horizon now. The Star Keeper emerged from hyperspace with what looked like half a nebula still clinging to its hull. The World Ender dropped out of faster-than-light travel with weapons that glowed like captured stars. Each ship was unique, but they all shared the same flowing patterns and the same destination. How many are coming? Damon asked. Long-range sensors are detecting at least 300 ships, Dr. Reeves said. And they're all converging on this station. Commander Crix made a sound that might have been a whimper. The largest military force in recorded history, and they are coming for one human janitor. Damon turned away from the viewport and looked at the faces surrounding him, alien features twisted with fear and confusion, all focused on him. A day ago he'd been invisible. Now he was the most important person in the galaxy, and he had no idea what to do with that responsibility. If I can talk to them, he said slowly, what would I even say? Damon stood in front of the Crystal Temple as 300 progenitor warships took defensive positions around Station Nexus. The museum was completely empty now except for him and Dr. Reeves, who refused to leave despite the danger. Outside the viewports, the massive fleet created a protective shell around the station, their hulls glowing with the same patterns that covered the temple floor. Just put your hand on the central console, Dr. Reeves said, her voice shaking with excitement and terror. If the genetic connection is real, something should happen. Damon hesitated. His whole life he'd been the guy who fixed things when they broke, cleaned up messes when other people made them, and stayed invisible while more important people made the big decisions. Now everyone was asking him to make contact with beings that could reshape the galaxy with a thought. What if I mess this up? He asked. Then we're probably all dead anyway, she said with brutal honesty. But if you don't try, we're definitely dead. He pressed his palm against the warm crystal surface and everything changed. The contact didn't feel like touching a machine. It felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Knowledge flooded his mind, not painful, but overwhelming in its completeness. He saw the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, when the progenitors ruled not through conquest but through protection and guidance. A voice spoke directly into his consciousness, ancient and patient and impossibly sad. Child of the distant shore, we have waited so long for this moment. The ships have awakened to answer the call of our scattered children. I'm not your child, Damon said, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or just thought the words. I'm just some guy from Earth who cleans floors for a living. Your world was one of many seeded with our essence when the great catastrophe forced our exodus. We thought all the colony worlds were lost to time and disaster. When your genetic signature activated our beacon, the Guardian fleet received orders they had waited eons to fulfill: find the survivors and protect them at all costs. Through the temple's connection, Damon could sense the massive ships positioned around the station. Their crews had been in suspended animation for millions of years, but they were waking up now, excited and desperate to see the descendants of the people they had been created to protect. The problem is, Damon realized, your ships think everyone else is trying to hurt us. The fleet's defensive protocols were designed for a dangerous galaxy. They see the military vessels approaching as threats to be neutralized. On his mental display, Damon could see fleets from dozens of species converging on their position. The aliens weren't coming to attack, they were coming because they were terrified and didn't know what else to do. But the progenitor ships were interpreting the approaching armadas as hostile forces preparing to harm their long-lost family. Can you call them off? Damon asked. The Guardian fleet takes orders only from verified progenitor descendants. You must choose their new mission parameters. Dr. Reeves watched from across the room as Damon's body went rigid, his eyes glowing with the same soft light that pulsed through the temple floor. She could see him having a conversation, but she couldn't hear the other side of it. Through the connection, Damon felt the weight of commanding the most powerful military force in galactic history. Every ship in the fleet was waiting for his instructions, ready to follow any order he gave. He could conquer the galaxy if he wanted to. He could demand that humanity be treated as the master race, with every other species serving as subjects. Instead, he thought about his life on Station Nexus. The aliens he worked with weren't perfect, but they weren't evil either. They were just people trying to get by, same as him. The galaxy was big enough for everyone. New mission parameters, he said, projecting his thoughts through the temple to every ship in the fleet. Protect all sentient life, not just humans. Work with the existing governments, don't replace them. Be guardians for everyone, not conquerors for anyone. The response was immediate. Across the fleet, weapon systems powered down from combat readiness to defensive standby. The ships spread out from their tight protective formation, taking positions throughout the star system that would allow them to watch over trade routes and patrol borders. The lead ship, Iron Promise, sent a message to the approaching alien fleets. We are the Guardians, awakened to protect all children of the stars. We seek cooperation, not conquest. Welcome, brothers and sisters. For the first time in galactic history, every major species received the same message simultaneously, translated perfectly into their native languages by technology beyond their comprehension. Damon stepped back from the temple, breaking the connection. Dr. Reeves caught him as he swayed on his feet. Did it work? She asked. Outside, the progenitor ships were already beginning to escort alien vessels to safe harbor, offering technological assistance and protection from pirates. The galaxy's most ancient civilization had returned not as conquerors, but as the guardians they had always been meant to be. Yeah, Damon said, smiling tiredly. I think it worked just fine.